were at least half obliterated. In 1953, after 3 years of fighting, Korea remained divided in almost exactly the same place as it had been before the war began, the 38th parallel. While most people think the war ended more than 50 years ago, there never was a peace treaty. And more than 19,000 days later, the very, very long ceasefire continues today. The Joint Security Area on the border of South Korea is the one place where North Korean forces stand toe-to-toe with the rest of the world. On one side of this concrete marker is North Korea. On the other, the joint American-South Korean forces. Every flinch is monitored. Neither side wants to blink, and nobody has for more than 50 years. In this unique area, each side shows its best face. The North puts only well-fed top officers here, and the South stacks their side with men who are at least 1.77 meters or taller. But only one side is worried that their soldiers might want to defect across the divide.
You can see on the North Korean side how they're set up. They have two soldiers watching each other, so neither of them defect. And then they have their leader to the north, making sure that no one else from the north will come down and defect.
On the DMZ, everyone is considered the enemy.
Defector Ju Sung-il was a North Korean officer.
Whether you're a North Korean resident, a soldier, or South Korean defector, we had to kill without question.
With everyone watching, no one can cross here. And defecting anywhere else along the DMZ is nearly impossible. The DMZ, or Demilitarized Zone, is a 4-kilometer wide buffer that runs 238 kilometers along the border of North and South Korea. With more than 1 million landmines, high-voltage electric fences, and nearly 2 million soldiers, crossing over is almost certain suicide. Above ground, the DMZ is an almost impenetrable divide. But below ground, the North has secretly dug at least 4 invasion tunnels into the South. Carved through solid bedrock, the tunnels are wide enough to allow 10,000 North Korean soldiers an hour to sneak behind enemy lines. Some are even big enough to drive a tank through. These tunnels were discovered before they were completed, but military officials think there may be as many as 16 more scattered elsewhere along the DMZ. The DMZ helps North Korea keep its own citizens inside the country and cut off from the rest of the world.
She's very blind, isn't she?
She's totally blind.
At the hospital, more than 1,000 blind patients from all walks of life have been picked by the government to see Dr. Ruet. Waiting in line, we meet an older woman who's been blind for 7 years. Her son-in-law has brought her today for her preliminary exam. She's totally blind in her right eye and can barely see out of the other.
No hand movement.
Dr. Ruet's team examines the patients to make sure cataracts are the source of their blindness. A cataract is a clouding of the normally clear lens of the eye. It's like a window that is frosted or yellowed. With the right equipment, it's easy enough to peel out the clouded lens and replace it with a clear plastic one. Dr. Ruet is ready to begin his surgery. With his modern equipment and expertise, it's a quick and simple procedure. It takes only minutes to replace each lens. But with more than 1,000 patients waiting, Dr. Ruet's team needs to treat more than 100 people every day. In the developed world, cataracts rarely get so bad, especially in young people, that they result in blindness. But here, because of poor care and likely poor nutrition, the incidence is as much as 10 times higher than in the West and afflicts young and old alike. This woman is only 35, and her blindness has kept her from marrying. And this woman has been totally dependent on her husband for years. The demand here is enormous. But in North Korea, cataracts are only a small part of the humanitarian nightmare. German physician and human rights activist Norbert Fallerton worked for over a year in North Korea. He shot pictures of the horrible medical conditions, bloody old operating tables, beer bottles for IVs, no antibiotics or anesthesia.
Of course, the North Korean government will tell you everything is free in North Korea. It's not true, because it's not available. There is no medicine, there is no running water, there is even no soap in the hospital.
But it was the lack of food and its effect on children that made the most lasting impression.
When I was a medical doctor in North Korea, I saw a lot of starving children. I saw children dying under my hands when I was too late, when there was no more need for any emergency duty, because the child was dying when I came into the room. So I felt so helpless.
In the mid-1990s, natural disasters and government mismanagement created a famine that killed up to 3 million people, about 10% of North Korea's population. Taking place in the heart of prosperous East Asia, it was one of the worst famines of the century. Today, nearly 40% of North Korean children remain chronically malnourished. The average 7-year-old boy in North Korea is nearly 20 centimeters shorter and 10 kilos lighter than his brother in South Korea.
But I'd say the damage to his bones is permanent.
They're called the stunted generation.
It's a tragic situation, and it's extraordinary because same race, same people, same basic diet, and that's all malnutrition.
Reluctant to ask for help from the outside world, Kim Jong-il has expelled aid workers. Over time, he has isolated the country from much of the world, even cutting off communications with his neighbors to the south. This room on the DMZ is one of the few places set up for meetings between the North and South Koreans. One door opens to the south and the other to the north. They hold hands to keep from being pulled over the border. Both sides have access. But despite only being separated by a pane of glass, a meeting is hard to come by. Simply trying to get a message across the border reveals how much relations have broken down. Today, the joint U.S.-South Korean forces have a message to pass to their counterparts only a few meters away in the north. A telephone hotline is supposed to connect the two sides. They use a 1962 Russian crank phone contributed by the North Koreans in the 1980s to ring up their neighbors to the north. Apparently, it's not a good day to call North Korea. But there is a foolproof method to get their message across.
Pick up the phone. We have a message to pass.
전달할 통지문이 있으니 전화를 받아주시기 바랍니다.
We have a message to pass and we'll be reading it.
전달할 통지문을 지금부터 읽겠습니다.
To Senior Colonel Kwak Yong-hun, Korean People's Army. Subject, remains repatriation.
The South Korean forces have found the body of a North Korean soldier who was washed downstream after a recent storm.
In accordance with paragraph 13 Foxtrot of the Armistice
They want to
Agreement,
repatriate this body, along with more than 50 Korean war remains they believe belong to the North.
he failed to respond to our proposals to meet on 26 July.
They've tried once before to reach the North Koreans over this issue.
I propose to meet you in the Military Armistice Commission conference room at 1400 hours to arrange the repatriation of all these remains. Signed, Colonel John W. Towers, Secretary, United Nations.
But today, again, the only response is silence. Evidently, the North Koreans respond only when Kim Jong-il tells them to. Making the case that it's part of our medical research, I've been pushing our minders for a while to let us go to the home of a blind patient. Much to my surprise, they suddenly agree. The blind woman lives in a 6th-floor apartment in the heart of Pyongyang. Since I'm told I'm the only American in the country, I feel lucky, but a bit surprised that the minders are willing to take me here.
What a beautiful home.
There are 6 government officials watching our every move, but it's still a rare chance to see inside a real North Korean home. Like others in Pyongyang, this is a privileged family. The woman lives here with 4 of her family members, including her 2 granddaughters.
How difficult is life for your mother without sight?
The son-in-law answered without missing a beat.
The most difficult thing for my mother-in-law is not being able to see Kim Jong-il, the dear leader.
Why do you want to see the supreme leader so much, so bad?
이 세상에 났다가 우리 수령님 덕에 우리 자식들 팔남매가 이렇게 행복하게 사는 걸 우리 수령님을 쳐다보고 인사하고 싶어도 수령님이 용상이 우리 빛이라도 보였으면 하는 소원이 됐습니다.
She was obviously moved, but what surprised me was so was everyone else.
This party official is crying.
Even this government minder.
어머니 말씀드려서 눈물이 나는데 나라도 그 장군님 안 계신다면 우리는 다 죽은 목숨을 하는 거예요. 나도 어렸을 때 아버지 잃고 정말 장군님 품속에서 학원을 거쳐서 오늘처럼 이렇게 도민의 대상 지도를 이루라는데.
North Korea is a very small country. How does the great leader defend it against big powers like America?
Even though North Korea is small, we serve the greatest leader in the world. We have a strong arm of unity, which is stronger than America's atomic bomb. America has no idea how to deal with us. This is all because we have General Kim Jong-il as the leader of our nation.
It helps to have nuclear weapons, doesn't it?
As the conversation wound down, I wondered, where did North Korea's willingness to face down the entire world come from?
Our country's unity is stronger than a nuclear weapon, so we're not afraid.
How did this powerful mindset take hold? North Korea's defiant stance toward the rest of the world stems from a philosophy created by Kim Il-sung called juche.